Welcome back to another episode of That Backyard Property Pod. We are back again today with another mini-series. Today we are tackling how to make an offer. When buying a property, there's generally two ways of purchasing that property. One is through an auction, really common in Sydney, some parts of Melbourne, and then other parts of Australia it's less common. The other is private treaty. This is where you negotiate with a seller and an agent to purchase the property and the final purchase price. We'll be tackling the private treaty part in this episode. So, the first part to making an offer is understanding the certain layers or certain aspects of the offer. So what we're going to tackle today is those aspects. So the first part is the purchase price. How much are you actually going to spend on the property and present to the agent and the seller? When making an offer, I would strongly encourage anyone to understand what their comfortable price is and what their walkaway is. This will draw a line in the sand if the negotiation is heating up and it's starting to get too high for what you are actually comfortable with. So making this offer with the agent is vital. Making sure you're comfortable with what you're presenting to them based on the purchase price and subsequently the repayments. I'd strongly encourage to use your mortgage broker through this part of the process. The next part of the offer is the deposit. How much are you actually going to put towards the deposit to secure the property? This isn't including the full contribution. So in Sydney in particular, it's generally 10% of the purchase price that you need to outlay to secure the property. In other parts of Australia, this can vary depending on what the agent's recommendation is. In Perth, you could probably put down 2 to 5%. It's important to note that the more you put down, the more serious it does portray to the seller. So I'd really be mindful of what you're putting down as a deposit, knowing full well that this deposit will go towards the purchase along with the rest of your contribution. The next part or the next aspect is the clauses. The primary one being the finance clause. In a lot of parts of Australia, a 14 or 21 day finance clause is popular and it's usually expected. In other parts, once again Sydney, you're looking at a cooling off period of 5 days. So it varies depending on where you're looking to buy. So it's crucial that your mortgage broker understands what aspects of an offer need to be presented and the difference between the states and territories. If we focus on Perth in particular, 21 days to get finance is very, very common. However, the banks don't generally take that long. So the shorter you can make the finance clause, the more appealing it can be to the seller. In most cases, if an offer was to fall over, it's generally because of the finance not coming through for that particular buyer. So a real estate agent will generally speak to a mortgage broker through this part of the process to understand the confidence they have of getting the formal finance approval. When presenting this part of the offer, I would be inclined to make sure that we have the pre-approval for the buyer and we're trying to make the finance clause as short as possible to give the agent and the seller more confidence in the offer. The other clauses you'll tend to find is a building report, a pest report, and sometimes you'll see in contracts a working order clause as well. Definitely speak to your settlement agent or conveyancer around the other clauses, just so you're aware of what can be included in a contract and what can't. You might also see a subject to sale in these parts of an offer, which is where you need to sell your property to purchase the new property. Most sellers don't particularly like this clause, so be very mindful around what is possible when you're speaking to your mortgage broker. The final part of the offer is the settlement period. This has become the most crucial part of the offer purely because of the undersupply and the need for the seller to understand what purchase price is going to be for their property, and therefore what they can do with that money for the next property that they're looking to buy. What I'm encouraging all of my buyers to do is to speak with the agent and understand what the requirements are for the seller for a settlement period. The seller would have already committed somewhere, and if they have, it means they need the settlement to be as quick as possible. However, if the seller hasn't found another property and they're wanting just to understand what they can sell their property for, then they might need a longer settlement so that they can go out and find that next dream home for them. When going through this process, make sure you understand the requirements from the seller around the settlement period so you can provide some flexibility in order for them to accept your offer. So recapping, the 4 aspects of making an offer under a private treaty is the purchase price, the deposit, the clauses, which include the finance and building and pest, and then the settlement period, which is where the money will change hands and you will get the keys to your new property. Thanks so much for being a part of this community. I love being able to share the knowledge that I've generated over the years of being a broker. I would love it if you could reach out, ask any questions you've got at all. Please share it with anyone that you know is looking to buy a property, because all of these parts of the information will help them through the process. And I cannot wait to see you again next week.